Hello, my name is Liz Harrison, and thank you so much for joining me today at this wonderful convention 2022. Today, I want to share with you how we are building school-wide social emotional skills in our staff and students as an unfolding ethnography and framework. So today, I'd like to share with you what we have tried so far, what has gone well, what has not gone swimmingly, and some of the research backing our choices in hopes that you might walk away with some skills or some ideas or even just some common language with which to begin your own journey or with which to continue. Like so many of you, we are riding the pandemic waves and rebuilding post pandemic wave or post lockdown or staying at home plan as we go, of course. And some interesting questions have come from this process. What is valuable in the time that we have? So this journey began for me well before COVID, I would say. My very first year teaching in Grande Prairie as well, I had a 30-2 English class of 42 mostly male students in a windowless room in a corner of one of the high schools here. And it was rough. It was block 4, end of the day, 42, lots of body odor. Oh my gosh. And it was an intense, block to try to get through for a semester. So um, the wonderful students, wonderful as I think of them now, at the beginning were just brick walls. They didn't have a desire to engage. They were sort of like, make me, and it was tough. So imagine this wonderful group with poetry. And being a first year teacher, I didn't realize that, of course, you don't really have to write poetry as part of the curriculum after grade 10, which is a gift to many students, although some of them just love it. Um, 30-2 writing poetry, I offered to the class after a few days of torture. Hey, would anybody like to get up and share their poetry that they've written? And one amazing student decided, okay, yes, I would love to get up and share my poetry. And I said, okay, how long do you want? He said, oh, well, I'll talk for the full 90 minutes if you'd let me. So I said, well, I'll let you know if we come to a place where it's important to pause, or I'll redirect you if we need to, but let's see what you do. So that's what we did. And he got up and shared with the class an amazing poem that he had written. He had had some really tough life situations. And as he was sharing, something magical happened that I have forever been trying to always recreate and recapture since. He, with his vulnerable sharing, made it possible for everyone else in the class, all those students, to say, hey, that's me too. I have experienced this, or some slice of what he had gone through. And so, with that came down walls. All of a sudden, we had a very different group, and we were willing to engage in a way that I hadn't seen before. And I could nail it down to that one interaction. So, how do you recreate that when it wasn't, in fact, me, the teacher, really doing anything other than sort of stepping back and allowing this to happen? Maybe now I can see I created some conditions with my first year nervousness or unawareness, maybe we should say. But since then, I have always been researching this topic. How do we get people to courageously be vulnerable? How do we get people to take those steps forward to sort of let their guards down when it's safe and share something that's important to them, something they've created? So, as an English teacher, of course, this is like the thing that we do. And so, every time we ask students to present, every time we're thinking about how do we create the conditions for that vulnerability, for that openness, and for people to feel safe and yet also feel seen as others engage with them. So, going into this social emotional practice, those were my foundations. I also am coming from a wonderful and exceptional school in terms of what we have built. Spencer, from its inception, has really been focused on Maverick culture. And we're going into year 9 now, or we're in year 9. And what has evolved has been really interesting. So we've been tracking different things. And this is going to be kind of a collection. I've tried to sort of maintain some kind of a chronological order here, just so you can see that unfolding of what we're experiencing and what we're developing. But I called it an ethnography because I'm in the mix. So I'm definitely not an unbiased source. And yet I'm proud and excited to share the things that we've come up with. So here's the context. This is direct from our school website. Everyone at Charles Spencer is tasked with becoming a maverick. So if you weren't one before, when you get to us, you're gonna be. So in saying maverick, we mean a unique character, an inspired or determined risk taker, forward-looking, creative, eager for change, someone who propels Alberta in a new direction, who alters the social, cultural, or political landscape. That is from Aretha Van Herk. So when we were developing things from the beginning until now, we're always using this idea as sort of our guiding light, as our one of our main value principles. Along with this, or in support of this, we were tracking different things that were how are they landing with students? How are students feeling socially and emotionally engaged at school? And we developed 3 pillars years before the pandemic, thinking about the steps that we take in different areas to make that culture happen or to realize that culture. So those 3 pillars are connect, belong, and celebrate. And I use these all the time just to sort of guide the choices that I'm making. Do they fall into one of these 3 categories? And if not, why not? What's going on there? So we're looking always to connect with students and help our students connect to each other, connect with our community, connect with stakeholders, just connecting all over the place. How can we introduce and bring you in? Belonging. How do we make you feel like this is home? This is the way we do things. Make sure it fits for the people who we are doing them for. How do we help students find their clubs and sports and teams and their people so that they're supported with teachers and without teachers? And finally, celebration. How do we take time to celebrate? How do we think about the moments worth celebrating? If you come to the end of something and you don't take that time to celebrate, does your brain even remember that it happened? Sometimes not. And so coming back to those 3 pillars has definitely helped influence and guide our decision making through this process. So, if we think about what we're doing at the 3 different levels, this is going into the pandemic lockdown and a few things that have happened throughout. So, I am definitely not the expert to talk to you about the school level actions, although I am involved at a pretty root level with the planning of this committee's actions. There are so many things that are happening in the school that reflect and connect to and support and lead to and come from the same work, because we have those pillars, because we have that Maverick culture. It's layered all over the place, and it has been since our inception. So at the school level, the things that I know about are that we have amazing, amazing administration. We actually went into this pandemic losing 2 administrators and having a few new team members join us, anyways. So with that change, that is a lot of transition. And yet, we really took time to celebrate the amazing outgoing administrators. We had a parade for them because it was lockdown and it was, the end of that year, and we couldn't be together inside. So we were together outside in very loud, exciting ways. And, there was lots of crying and things. It was great. And then with our incoming wonderful administrators who have definitely just taken up this mantle and enabled us to continue on in this great work. We welcomed them with a big Christmas surprise last year and just made sure that they felt very honored and respected and recognized, because they do things that I know we don't even know about to help us out and to make sure that things will function as they're intended to. So amazing admin. They're always, always open to curriculum review. And when we came into this pandemic, post first lockdown, pre September 2019, I think, we had our board say, okay, listen, this is a crazy thing, a crazy year. You guys are doing amazing work. If there are areas of the curriculum that it makes sense to forego because it's a pandemic, because it's a global situation, please be empowered to do that. And that was fantastic, amazing. So we met as the different levels of school administrators and coordinators, and then with staff, and made sure that we sort of had that empowerment. And that looked like a lot of different things. There wasn't one approach that every department took, but we all sort of had that permission and upheld at the very highest levels of policy to do that. So that is foundational. I don't know that we can do the work that we do without that support. Admin really took a look at our schedules and tried to balance them so that if we were to be online, as we wouldn't have an overwhelming variety of classes to be instructing for and planning for and engaging with. It was maybe a less dynamic year for some of us in that respect, but it made a lot of difference to be able to plan for, say, 310-1 classes and an Art 9 instead of 30-1, 20-1, 20-2, LA 9. That's a lot more, juggling. And then they were above and beyond with tech support. Our wonderful division hooked us up with laptops by the end of last year. And so that really made a huge difference. But of course, in the meantime, we had webcams and things that we were trying to troubleshoot, people who were never using technology, who all of a sudden were floored with how much support people wanted to offer them as they had to figure this out and navigate it. None of us were alone because of the way our admin modeled those important supports and relationships. In our department level, what we found was one of the most important things was to be teaching the priority items. So we did right off the bat in August last year as an English department a curriculum review from 9 to 12-1 and -2, looking at what are the most important curricular outcomes. We used grade level partners. So if you were teaching tens, you worked with the tens. If you were teaching 20s, if you were working between a variety of numbers, as I said, our admin had tried to kind of limit that. And so everyone was able to participate at the grade level they were primarily teaching. With that, we didn't want to all be teaching the same thing. We had tried to do that the year before in that first lockdown, and it was very much a struggle. We are always reflexively producing and responding to what our students are giving us, and just the ones in front of us, not every student in the building. So with that, instead of trying to align ourselves with the actual activities and projects we're doing, we set some standards and we planned for collaborative pacing. So that one of us was sick, we would all be sort of in that same rough area and could offer our own materials as replacement. We thankfully were not in that position, but had we been, we would have been in the same spot. We did a lot of work together with Google Classroom. We all were part of each other's Google Classrooms and made sure that there was a lot of linking and curriculum overlap between us just to make sure that we were all sort of looking the same direction. We together have been working on a character values goal for the last few years. So this just aligns so beautifully with our social emotional committee discussion. I wanted to set this up as things that were in place as we went into this pandemic teaching, as we continued in it. So we wonder if we focus on character study in our classrooms and provide students with the opportunity to explore their own character, to what extent will this create an inclusive and respectful learning environment in English language arts classrooms? So basically, we're wondering if we teach a lot about character study and we look a lot at our own characters and we think about how character works and where it comes from, will we be better humans to each other? And I think the answer is yes. So we're continuing on in that goal. It's really helped us focus our literature viewing and framing as we're going through this interesting wave after wave of transition. We have that sort of guiding star idea of character and what could be more important right now than the way we treat other people. So everybody's gone through something. It's really the most valuable thing we can teach and the most valuable thing we can model. We intentionally set some boundaries this year, just some cultural practices to really focus our attention on the positive. I don't know if you've ever been into a department meeting or a meeting where things have sort of degraded into complaining without any solutions, and we get all worked up and we're upset, and then you leave and you feel terrible. So we didn't want to do that because we know better. And so we've learned if we can, pose those problems, bring solutions, hold space to talk, and yet not allow just that sinking into the mire of complaints, right? Sometimes that's just not productive in the right direction. So we've worked really hard on that, and we also worked really hard and continue to work hard on not interrupting each other. That is one of the toughest things, and yet it's one of the best qualities of our department. If you have the floor to speak, the floor is yours. If someone interrupts you, someone will shush them. And I know that sounds very rigid. It's one of the most rigid things about us. Most of us are very flexible in a lot of ways, but that has allowed us to always make progress and to not feel like you're in this meeting and you never have a voice, right? So if you have a thing to say, you get to say it and everyone will listen and wait for you. A lot of great things that we do. One of my favorites is English teacher lunch. We try on Wednesdays to have lunch together, just in somebody's classroom. Sometimes it's 2 people, sometimes it's 17 people, and it just depends. Well, not 17, of course, would be the right amount for the rules. But we've got a great group, and this is just space for us to be humans with each other. We don't. Sometimes we do, have things to say about teaching, but we don't need to spend that time in that direction. And yet we enjoy each other as people. And so it's really just nice to protect our time once a week for our mental health as teachers, for our connections as colleagues, and just for those needs we have as humans. So looking at now the leaf level, sorry, I meant to explain those trees in the background. If we think of our school administration as the trunk, maybe our division as the roots or the source there, and then the admin as the trunk, department as the branch, and here I am, the leaf on the tree. So in my classroom, because I had this background from this amazing student years ago in 30-2, having this thing that happened that I've been trying to name and qualify ever since, I had some ideas of what we would do with this pandemic context and how we could preserve social connection and protect the things that are the most important with being together in our classroom community. So we did a lot of work with connecting right off the bat. Students had been in their houses by themselves potentially for 5 or 6 months at that point. A lot of us had really hard lockdowns for the first time. And if you hadn't, you probably have had something tough happen since. And so for students, for children, what do we do with that? How are we all of a sudden ready to snap to it and learn? Well, we're not. So that first year, I made sure that a lot of what we were doing, especially with my early morning grade 10 class, was social. And I developed something called walk and talk. So I would give them a few topics. They would stray from them. It's okay. They would have a chance to talk, and they would, talk about it eventually. But I gave them topics, and we would go outside and walk around the football field, or for a longer walk around the whole school. That we're in a community campus, so we've got some nice walking areas really close to us. And their phys ed forms covered the legalities. So that was a helpful thing the phys ed department did, just sort of a coverall blanket field trip form for our local area. So we could go outside every day, which meant we could take our masks off, a gift safely once we're outside, once we're distancing. We could unmask and see each other's faces. What a concept. That was a very hard year. I'm sure everybody remembers like starting semesters with the masks on and you don't know who's actually behind them, or, they're all four of them are blonde and you can't remember their names. So that was a real gift for students and for me to be able to see them. And I found within the first week that we did this, we went probably, I think, almost every day. We had at the beginning 5 or 6 students who didn't have someone to walk with. And by the end of the first week, everybody had a buddy. So from then on, everyone would want to be in school because they wanted to meet up with their partner. They wanted to chat. They knew Miss Harrison was going to give them some time for that. And it spilled over into other classes as well. So other teachers were like, hey, what's that? What are you doing out there? And I told them and I shared it with the staff, and we all just sort of went, oh yeah, let's do that. That sounds amazing. So every class has topics that could be taken up in conversation, and how nice to go outside until it got really cold in the January, I think, to have a little conversation, have a quick little walk. And the other thing that this was my sneakiness. I read a wonderful book I'd highly recommend called Burnout, Managing, Unlocking the Stress Cycle, I think it's called. Doctors Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and I'll reference all of these in my citations, but they had developed just sort of a message that really resonated with me. So imagine you're a gazelle. You're in Africa. You're wandering across the plains, and a lion comes and chases you, and somehow you manage to get away. Well, after that, you have had this huge spike of adrenaline and cortisol and all of these very stressful things chemically produced by your brain, which is the thing that saved you, got you out of there. What do you do with those chemicals? They're going to float around and make you crazy and twitchy and excitable unless you do something to get rid of them. So animals in the wild, you would see them shake. Humans, maybe we go for a little run, or we feel really, until we talk through it with our friends. That walking was also pushing those chemicals out through their lymphatic drainage systems and other areas of the body. As with managing our physical systems, we were able to manage our mental systems a little bit better because of the way that those two things work together. So that context, some board game Fridays. I went to Value Village and I bought just a ton of different board games, some English related, some not, Jenga. And when I saw the students needed it, we played games, because sometimes they would come in and there would be 4 people crying and 17 are out all of a sudden and they're having stress, and it's a pandemic. So that's allowed. And it's English, so we're still having conversation. And, there's some really nice flexibilities with our curriculum that align beautifully with taking those outside the box approaches, especially last year when it was, the thick of things were really happening. Another area that I was able to influence in my classroom level was the way that we began. So we were in person, which was wonderful. And we started with the hardest thing, presentations. So what I wanted students to do was to get up and be able to talk talk about themselves to their classmates, to share who they were, to share what they loved. And so the thing that was hard about it was just the presenting, not the topic. They were already going to be experts, this I know for sure, in the thing that they were presenting. So we had a huge variety of different things. If you want to hear more about that, do check out my show and tell session about multimodal learning. But for this session, I'll give you the quick highlight reel. We had everything. Students were engaging their classmates as audiences. That was part of the assignment. So we had students who brought in balloons and showed us some volleyball techniques and individually wrapped treats that had been baked with masks and gloves. Some of them brought games to show us that they were big fans of. Some of them had us balance and test out our yoga skills, just all kinds of things that they were able to share. And the presenting took a full week, if not longer, for some classes. I did it with every English class across the board. And the reason I gave it so much time was because that was the valuable thing. The thing that made sense when we were in person was to get to know each other. And surprisingly, a lot of students didn't think to get phone numbers from their classmates who they have just met and now are starting to connect with. And so I would say now and then, hey, this is a good day to get a phone number. If we go online, now you have some people to talk to, and I'll put you in breakout rooms together so you can chat. So it was really supporting relationships in a very specific, overt way that I haven't done before. So that was one of the pieces coming into this year that I was holding on to. When we were online, I had a weirdo attendance question of the day so that I could hear from everybody and just make sure that everyone felt heard and acknowledged. They didn't have to have their screen on. They could answer in the chat, but I wanted to hear every single voice that was in that chat room. Finally, anything that we did with composition, we tried to do a lot of things showing learning in unique ways because we had such digital capabilities. So I used more video, I used more voice recording and audio. I used some different just gave some options for how students could show their learning in ways that are very non-traditional in English. So a lot of, one student did a dance for a representation project or created an art piece or created a playlist. So some really interesting things with those. And then finally, anything that we were writing about, students could always write about COVID, but they never had to write about COVID. So that was always an option. But if you are sick to death of it and you can't stand thinking about it and it's driving you crazy and you don't want to spend another minute there, don't. And if you can only think about this and you don't know how to process, if you need some catharsis and this is how you can get through your thoughts, go for it. There's lots of flexibility one way or the other, but no requirement. So I think holding that space, sort of reflected to students the permission they had to either engage with that or not. Maybe they're in the middle of it and it's not the time. Maybe they are through it and now they have to figure that out. But I know I was in that position, and so were so many of us. So good to hold space for that. Literature review. Here I'll share with you the resources and foundational frameworks that we've been using to develop our social emotional learning activities and curriculum. Frank Gresham is our primary provider. He wrote Effective Interventions for Social Emotional Learning, which I read over the summer. And it was one of 6 different books and studies that I had taken out from our ATA library. So if you're looking for some excellent resources, they have quite a selection and it's very easy. They just send them to you in the mail and you send them back, no postage required. So definitely something worth taking a look at. I have returned this book. So if you want to take a look at Frank Gresham's work, you can. He talks a lot about social competence. So social competence is an evaluative term based on judgments given certain criteria that an individual has performed a social task adequately. So what does that look like to perform a social task, and who are the judges? Well, students exercise their social agency, and for some of our students, as probably for some of yours, returning to a school environment where there are so many people making many demands on them all the time has not gone well, especially when they were really isolated or had a lot of freedom on their own following or through the different lockdown stages. So for our teenagers, how do we reflect to them, here are different social competencies and agencies that they can exercise without shame, without, highlighting their deficiencies or making them feel worse. So social agency can really be an academic enabler because, you might have students who you're seeing that negative behavior and they're getting this negative reinforcement and you get in this sort of stuck cycle. You might also have students who have found really great it seems like these are very adaptive skills, and yet the behaviors that they lead to are not. So very quiet, well-behaved students who never ask for help or who never advocate for themselves. But this is what we're looking at now as a whole staff. And, previous to sharing this graphic, we had a lot of staff who were sort of like, well, I'm already good at relationships. I'm already good at this. What is new about this for me? And that's absolutely true. We have a lot of capacity and a lot of skills. But when you start to name these different areas, you might realize, hey, I might have a lot of ability there. How about my students? What are they doing with this? How do they manage these difficulties, especially if they have been more isolated and seen less modeling, made less eye contact than they have for years? This is not normal. And so looking at these as a breakdown, I have shared a PDF document of this and a few other just versions of these same skills. So you'll see in the document, there is a wheel where you can shade in to sort of measure or track. Here's where I feel like I am in this area. Then there's also a non-wheel form of just the specific outcomes here that are listed. And we use that to sort of think generally about where are our students, what is most important priority-wise for us this year. And that conversation is still evolving. Another area of research that we're drawing from, and this was a huge revelation for me this summer as I'm a master's student for the University of Lethbridge in their Canadian Literacies program right now. And I was absolutely floored to find out there are 3 Bloom's taxonomies. I have only ever heard of the cognitive domain. So the cognitive domain, of course, you're probably familiar with. We all learned about this in our undergrad programs, if not afterwards. So with this, of course, we work the steps and we want to take students from the bottom to the top with what they're able to do with knowledge. One, now we have 2 other areas that we can consider that also work in concert and uniquely with the cognitive and beyond the cognitive domain. So the psychomotor domain on the far right-hand side here, you can see is very much related to the physical body. The very top of that pyramid, non-discursive communication or paralinguistics, is a huge, huge crossover with that affective domain. And of course, we feel our feelings in our bodies. So there are definitely, there's language terms that we could probably add there to describe, what does that feel like in perception when I feel sad? Where does that show up in my body? When I feel excited, where does that show up in my body or in my mind or in my perception? So the paralinguistics are not about how does this show up necessarily, but also how can other people perceive this? So facial expressions, tone of voice, maybe with body language, with some of the stances or the positioning or the movements, all of these things can be perceived as communication. And in the affective domain, I have added a top pyramid. So just a little disclaimer. I thought, okay, the other 2 have 6. There must be something missing. And I think if I were to propose a capstone here, which I have, intentional nervous system regulation is the goal here. So all of these different layers you're thinking about with starting at the bottom, receiving. I'm able to welcome and be comforted by what people are offering me. I'm able to consider how to accept other people's bids for attention or communication. I might be able to recognize when someone's wanting to be friends with me. And then responding is I can show that in the reverse. I can answer them. I can examine how I might welcome someone into my circle. I might be able to share about what has happened in a relationship, or here's, what makes me happy. That top pyramid that I've added, that intentional nervous system regulation, if I am able to understand how I'm responding, whether I have been triggered and, I'm responding in a really emotional dysregulation state, or if I'm okay, I hear this person, this is happening, I can understand it's not about me, I can separate myself from that, gut reaction as I'm able to get ahead of my own response. I would say that's the goal here. And it's not to prevent other people from knowing what your emotions are, it's to manage them in such a way that they don't run your life. So that's where we're sort of drawing from some of these pieces. And knowing these taxonomies now, oh my gosh, are they ever influencing all over over the place as I do plan, because of course we're not just moving up the cognitive domain, we're exploring all kinds of different domains as we go through the day. In 2020, a ministerial order was passed down related to this framework, suggesting that we would be soon using it. And I looked at some of the citations. They're looking at these different areas, 5 areas of wellness, and developing curricular general learning outcomes so far related to those. I suspect specific outcomes will follow, but I haven't seen those yet. So there are some concerns about the source materials. This was developed by the previous government before the NDP. So I believe that was Wild Rose, but I can't remember. So they are a little bit dated. Most of the citations are dating from 2009 or from 2005. I think one is from 2009, and it's the most recent one. So there are some likely new developments in wellness understanding and research that maybe should be considered. They do offer a definition for wellness that has been drawn from what they say is consultation with stakeholders. And that definition is: wellness is a balanced state of emotional, intellectual, physical, social, and spiritual well-being that enables students to reach their full potential in the school community. Personal wellness occurs with commitment to lifestyle choices based on healthy attitudes and actions. So, one concern that's not named here is money. So, when I was doing this researching and going through all of the different sources that were given by the framework listed in their sources cited page, they refer to a lot of American sources and a lot of large scale studies that sort of, I don't know, they refer back to the problem of not enough research and yet make some conclusions. But some of the most significant Government of Canada material names economic inequity as one of the biggest drivers of a lack of wellness. And so, to have this as part of a school's uptake without some of the services that might need to accompany those seems a little bit unrealistic. And so if this comes down and you're thinking, hey, is this the best we can do? I would suggest it may not be. And so I'd like us to definitely continue to explore this. I think as a province, we can see the need for this, but I'm not sure that we've answered the question satisfactorily yet. Good news though, I did take a look through as part of this project. I audited an average grade 10 student's schedule. So the average grade 10 student would have an English class, a social class, science, math. For us, comm would be part of that. Phys Ed 10, of course. And I chose a CTS option and a non-CTS option, both of which I'm familiar with. Took all of these as outcomes that were related or naming social emotional skills in some way. And I copied and pasted them and then put them into Wordle, which I don't know if you've used Wordle before, but it will give you the most commonly used terms back. It's sort of like a nice generation that way. And so what I saw is that all of these different department areas, I did them one at a time, but all of them included attitudes, communication, community, culture, identity, respect, responsibilities, and social or societal elements. So everybody in every curriculum has wellness. It's not in anybody's curriculum. And so with that, being able to share that with the staff was really eye-opening, because of course people feel like they're already doing it, and we are. And yet there are some things that we can do more intentionally once we have the tools. And so just be able to share that affirmation. If you're wondering if you do work with this already, absolutely you do. Anytime you're working on how do I pair these students up so that they can, do the thing and execute this well, you're already considering those dimensions. Another contributor that I used quite frequently from the beginning is the work of Paul Borns. He wrote Deepening Community and hosts a website related to these efforts as well. He is the expert from whom I gathered my cultural understandings of what it is to be in deep culture, what it is to be in shallow, or what I call shark-infested, or he calls fear-based culture. So how do we interact if we're in these different states, and how does this either limit or allow for us to connect and to share ourselves with each other safely and respectfully, and share in ways that it will be honored, that what we share will be honored. So I have a few questions that I look for here when I'm trying to identify what kind of culture I'm seeing in the classroom. If I ask a question, what happens? Is everyone included? Think back to my walk and talk partners. It was great to see that they eventually found each other after a little bit of process. Can we both ask for and offer help? If we can only do one or the other, it's not deep community. It means that you are using transactional help. So you do this for me and I'll do this for you, or you don't do that and I won't do that. So if it's transaction based, it's not deep community. Is our default setting assuming others are doing their best? And this is directly related and comes up in the very next slide from Brene Brown, which is one of the main questions that I've drawn from and used again and again and again from her different her text. She's got so much work now. Dare to Lead is one of my main references just for values identification and language, and it comes with this amazing question. As I said in the last moment here, would you say generally that others are doing their best? So if you want to pause and talk about this question or think about it, this is a good time to pause. And if you don't want to pause, that's okay. So what I'll share about this is coming from Brene Brown. Basically, if we assume others are doing their best, we extend that same kind of support and gratitude to ourselves. If we assume others are not doing their best, we probably feel the same way about ourselves, or we're feeling very judgy because. So she gives a great example of when this question appeared and was delivered to her. And I won't share that story. I'll leave it to you to read. But she goes through the process of understanding what it is to assume the best of others in such a realistic, accessible way. I would highly recommend that you take a look if you have questions or want to know more about this magic question. And if you ask other people, see what happens. What do they say? It's often they want to qualify well. All others, everybody, really? Just, well, averagely, like, can I just say those three? Or we can always often think of examples why that's not true. And so what you start to realize, what I realized, is that it's a practice. I have to practice assuming other people are doing their best and make myself make that assumption, because it makes my life better. If I assume that a student who comes in and throws their books on their desk and slams their head down, puts their headphones in, if I assume, oh, you're here to make my life hard today, aren't you? That is going to influence how I respond to them. And now I'm responding to my perceptions and not anything about them. If I go over and I say, hey, how's it going? You look like you're having a hard day. And they might choose not to engage with me, but they might say, yeah, this was the worst day ever. My grandma died this morning. We don't know. Sometimes kids come to school for strange reasons at strange times because it's where they feel safe. And if I can make them feel safe by assuming they're doing their best and then being curious instead of extending judgment or censure, oh, that goes far. And you know what? People remember that. That is visibly modeling those kinds of practices that we like to believe that we own and yet sometimes struggle to make visible to others. So many different notable contributors. Oh my gosh, there is just so much reading in this area, and I find one leads to another. So good luck. Enjoy your Amazon shopping. But if I could give you a few starting points, these are excellent ones, and they are directly continuing to influence my choices in the classroom every day, my choices in the social emotional committee work that I'm doing every week, the different things that I've done in the school since I discovered this magic thing that happened and started to learn more about it. So do take a look. And if you are looking for my full list of references, you can take a look at the attached PDF that has been shared. Practice. Actionable steps for growth and change. So this is tier one. This is whole school. The idea is that we're doing activities at a level that can reach everyone. And then, of course, there's all kinds of other things in the works and happening with students who are in a tier 2 or tier 3 behavior situation. So we started with, as a committee, trying to figure out what is our purpose here. So we knew that we were going to be responsible for delivering wellness to our school. This has not necessarily been historically welcomed by teachers, as outside sources try to help us, as you know. And so with our approach here, we wanted it to be something that was valuable to staff and felt felt respectful, felt like supportive, and yet not condescending or, like there's something to fix. We wanted to be affirming as much as we could with what people were doing already and build from there. So we are continuing to work on curriculum in terms of developing our own specific outcomes and branching out as needed from the CASEL framework. But our values and mission statement, and then the practices that we're building always go back to those three pillars and this idea of being a maverick. So we are happy to do things differently because that's how mavericks do things. And so even though this has definitely been a less packaged version, I think the richness of the work has been well worth it. So if you're thinking, oh, do I just want to do like the 7 steps of highly effective leadership, which is great, definitely there's some good stuff there. Making it your own will change your navigational skills of this stuff as well. So we're doing it as we go, but so far it's been an interesting journey, and I'm excited for what's coming next. So in our first year, we had a number of whole school activities that we were working on, and then have carried that into this year as well and expanded upon those. So one thing that I had added in a hallway upstairs was just an interactive bulletin board. I used black poster paper and I stapled a couple of metallic Sharpies to it. Surprisingly, they did not get stolen right away. I had like big cardboard attached to them saying like, please do not steal these things for leaving them. But students were able to leave their mark on this bulletin board, and we've done a few iterations of it since. Sometimes with song lyrics, sometimes with, what are you celebrating today? Always with something that's going to highlight something positive and growth minded. So there has been the odd person who's written something not growth minded or not appreciated. And we do have other students who sort of mitigate that. So they come and cross stuff out, or teachers do. I do replace them now and then, but it's a pretty easy, accessible kind of a format. And my next experiment will be with white paper and crayons, because one person wrote with Sharpie on the wall, so we're not going to have those for a little while. But it does give students somewhere that they can put themselves in the school, make their mark. Hopefully not on the walls. Had Valentines that we printed so that students could share with each other. One thing to note, we have an advisory block once a week on usually Thursdays. I think this year it's Thursdays. And it's to touch base with your advisory teacher, who's your advisory teacher for all 4 years. So we get these students in grade 9 and we see them right through to the end of grade 12. And sometimes we teach them and sometimes we don't. We are tracking with who they are as a human and what they need as a human, and connecting with their parents, connecting with families in a way that isn't ever related to an academic judgment. So it's nice, it's very freeing. And by the time you leave those students at the end of the 4 years, it's been a journey together. They change so much. And so we hand things out often in our advisory class, and that's where some of our activities are taking place. So I'll return to that. So Valentine's went out there. Students could share them with each other. They could write them to each other. We just kind of blanketed the school, and they were all featuring connect, belong, and celebrate with different little Maverick heart graphics. So a lot of fun there. We did an Easter egg hunt, and we did it completely on the fly. I think we had our meeting on the Tuesday on Easter. Maybe the last day was Thursday. And so we said, let's do this. And I went to Bulk Barn, and some amazing committee members showed up, and we just blanketed the school with chocolate. And the magical part of this, I wanted to see this unfold in the morning. So I got there a little early, and I'm standing at the top of my stairs drinking my coffee and watching students tear around looking for Easter eggs. And I would hear sometimes they would just come and get everything. And sometimes I would hear, oh, you know what? I have like a whole bunch. Let's leave those for other people. And so we started to see, these different events show you in action where you're at on that effective domain of blooms, just with, can students receive and respond and value? Can they show those character values? Can they live them? So really interesting to see some of those engagement pieces, and freezies as well. We stood outside so students going out for lunch could come and have a freezie, and some students, made sure that they got their friends to come and get one so that they wouldn't miss out, or, oh, I was in this other part of the school, are there any left? And we made sure. So just some really easy, accessible, fun things to sort of make students feel valued, to make school fun, to have us play a little bit. Play is important like never before, I think, these days. We also have as a school Maverick Ambassador and Citizen celebrations. So in our first years, we waited till the end of the year and we gave these awards out on an awards and honors night. And now what we do is we see the stuff all the time that kids are amazing and doing just fantastic things and treating each other well and representing our school beautifully. And so now we do every week a Maverick Ambassador and Citizen, and it's a shout out. So students can get them not because they have the entire list of criteria for the award. They can get a shout out because they're amazing at one thing. And so we can use that, in different ways to highlight students who are just being wonderful humans and deserve a shout out. And maybe their academics will never get them on the honor roll, but who they are as a person is a beautiful gift to our school, and we want to honor and recognize that. So these are currently teacher nominated. We made a Google form. You submit your criteria or your, check. They are this, they are that, they did this. And then you give a little write up, and our wonderful admin team finds a photo, sends a certificate home to the parents, and alerts them that their student has received this honor and recognition. And then we display them on our school televisions that are in different places in the school, and announce that in our advisory announcements. So it's a real celebration and a shout out for students who are just being caught doing amazingly great things. We have implemented, and this was probably the biggest move that we made last year, and it could not have happened without all of the staff that participated. There's no way. So we were talking about how do we, offer support for people who need help with Google Classroom or with Teams or with, the digital things, with I'm having a meltdown because everything is changing all the time, with those kinds of things. And how do we give ourselves some space to enjoy each other's company? We often get locked into our department groups for different things just on the merit of our academic areas. But we have amazing people at our school. And so we came up with this idea, work and play shops. And what we were doing is on PLC Fridays, we would have a morning session offered, and usually 6 to 10 sessions would be offered. A couple of those would be something related to our work. So you could go and get help with Google Classroom or learn how to print with Xerox or, different things like that. Power Teacher changed over this year. So we were, doing some supportive sessions for those things. But you could also go and learn how to make cream cheese and bagels with our foods teacher, or build a wooden Christmas decoration with our shop teacher, or go for a walk with a group and take your dogs. You could go on a run through the trails that are by our schools with the crazy runners of the school. I don't know about those people. You could do all kinds of things. You could come and paint in the art room. You could go into all of these different things. One group just read in the staff room one morning. They just wanted to get together and read. That's what they did, sat in the comfy chairs, drink their coffee. So all of these things, an hour and a half on a Friday, on a PLC Friday once a month. And it transformed us. We would come in from those times of sharing and connection and belonging and maybe celebration because we got to have a day where we got to do stuff like this, right? We'd be excited and we'd be ready to tackle whatever problems came, but we'd also be really ready to report the celebrations and to report the good stuff and start with, what are we doing well? What can we affirm? What can we embrace? All because we are using each other as experts. We're learning from each other. We're learning how people do the things that they do, the magical, amazing things that they do in their classrooms. We're borrowing from, oh my gosh, I need a mirror like you have, foods teacher. You're amazing. How could I use that in cosmetology or English? Different things like that we can celebrate and honor and understand our colleagues and, just visibility, right? So staff work and play shops have been a huge success. They've been ongoing. We've done them now for almost a year and a half, and they're not going anywhere. I don't think we didn't have one run this last PLC just because people are tired, but it is one of the most refreshing staff activity sessions that I've ever seen happen in schools. And so I'm just excited to see where we go with this. I hope that we continue to learn from each other and celebrate taking time with each other. So that has just been a huge gift to all of us and so easy to implement. All you have to do is say, hey, who wants to do a thing? And really, the planning is minimal. We have a small budget for our SEL activities. And so part of that, if you need a small amount of money to do something, or if we're bringing in a yoga teacher for a session, we can do that. And then we also have just a Google form where people can post, here are the sessions that I'm offering. Yeah, staff work and play shops, very easy to replicate. You already have the experts in your school, which is kind of amazing. The final thing that we did last year is a time capsule and a burn box. So we came to the end, and oh my gosh, what an end it was, right? We don't know what's happening. Are there going to be diplomas? Are there going to be these things? We have a big spike in numbers. Oh, are we going to have this summer free? Everything was very uncertain. And we were still carrying a lot of things around from the course of the year. So I don't know about you, but I did not want to go into summer thinking about that. And I was starting these master's courses, and I thought, okay, how can we get rid of some of this and leave it behind so we don't carry it around all summer or track it back into the building with us come September? So we had 2 boxes, and they were made by a wonderful staff member who's a wicked Cricut user. And so they made us these 2 boxes, and one was for the things we want to keep, a time capsule. It had a 2020, beautiful signage on it, and it was a beautiful box. And I tied it up with a ribbon and I hid it in a cupboard. So we saved all of these memories, even on a post-it note or little objects, things that people wanted to save. I didn't look through the box. We just put the lid on and closed it up. So we'll open that someday. And then the other box is what I wanted to do was a burn box. I have now had experiences with fire department workings that suggest that we can never burn anything at school, which is probably a good thing in many respects, not all, maybe. But we couldn't burn it, so we shredded it. Into that box, we put anything we wanted to leave behind. So on a post-it, all the things that made you angry. On a closed letter, sealed envelope, the things that you can't wait to leave behind. Something that gave us a physical, tangible release, as well as sort of that abstract, figurative, symbolic, we are leaving this behind kind of an effort. Not everybody wanted to participate in one or the other or both, and that was fine. People were able to if they wanted to, and it became something that could be ritual or ceremony, but it didn't have to be a big moment. But it was something that kind of cued our brains to, we leave this behind. We do not carry this with us now going forward. So year 1 with students, we're continuing on with the CASEL framework, and we've just now started to introduce them to the outcomes. And they looked at those. I have grade 12s now. They took one look and they were like, we're not good at those. So they know that there are some areas to practice before they're ready for the big wide world out there. So we're trying to make things very accessible, and we're looking at small bites for sure. Little bits in our weekly advisory. We have an activity that we roll out once a month. And so staff do this activity in our PLC time, and then we roll it out to the students with their version of it. So everyone's had the benefit of going through the process. It's not something where you have to like spill your guts or anything like that. I'll show you some of these examples. But our activities were low risk, and yet they got us talking about this and thinking about it, this conversation. So small bites, what we're starting with is trying to get some common language going with what is it when we talk about this social emotional skill set, and the activity that they do in advisory. The larger bites, I'm going to show you a slideshow that I put together, and I've actually saved a PDF copy. So you are welcome to use this and access it. It's part of the materials that I'm sharing here. I hope to someday make it into a website. So that's like goals. I'm not there today. But I would like to take all of these different activities and continue gathering them from wonderfully skilled teachers all over the place, because there's so much that we can do and so much that we do with how do we get our classes, the brand new group of students that has just walked through the door, from class to community. Because I know if I'm teaching difficult things, or if I'm teaching texts that are going to stir up emotions, or I want students to share their writing, or any kinds of things in all these different curriculums, like I said, have social, emotional aspects to them. So if I want functional group work, if I want functional communication, we got to work together. So how do we make that happen from the beginning? And we knew coming back into this year, it's not a normal year. We have leftovers and things, and pandemic still is going on. So, what do we do to empower students with, it's okay to be at school. It's okay for things to feel stressful, and yet they're not bad, right? They can be sometimes a little bit of play. There might be discovery of new people here, new humans that you want to interact with. So we did a huge blitz, and we had some amazing admin support for this. The first 4 days, they requested that staff focus only on classroom connections. I know people are, you're on the other side of this computer thinking like, what, 4 days, 4 whole days? I do this, I do that, I do this, I could never. So we got that exact reaction. Yep. But what are we going to do with these 4 days? So the Maverick Good Life Committee generated all of these activities, and they actually went over swimmingly. We had a lot of range. I'm not saying every single teacher took every minute of all 4 days to do only these. No, but a lot of people sort of came to this thinking, okay, I see the problems. What can I do to help them? Hey, these things are made already. Let's try one out. And then they liked them. So I hope you have the same experience. And if you take a look and it's not for you, or you would be horrified, that's fair. But I'd wonder, what's the most important thing this year? Why does it matter that we're not online and we're in person? What's the difference there, right? So this is the startup activity list that we shared with staff. We are continuing to add to it, but you'll see the PDF copy that you have received will just have mostly startup activities and not our advisory activities at this time. As well, a library, a social emotional materials library. So we offered big poster paper and Mr. Sketch scented markers and tennis balls and tennis ball cans and bags of candy, just different things that would support some of these activities that people could just grab the bin and take them from the staff room. So it was that easy. They didn't have to go and buy any materials. Once teachers were done with them, they could just return them to the library, the staff copy room, and they would be filled up again for someone else. A variety of activities here. We have some different things that are just getting students moving and thinking and seeing each other for who they are, but not who they are at face value. So Body Vote is an activity that comes with a whole list of things, and you can do this in a lot of different ways. I've taken students outside and stood in a circle and had them take a step away from me for everyone that is a yes for them. I've done this in a lineup. I've done this in a classroom where we're sitting or standing for yes or no. There's a lot of different ways to show your thinking multimodally. Some activities are about illustration, some are conversation based, and of course, we did provide all of the different topics that students could engage with. Snapshot time machine. This is a great one for a class that's using tech or wanting to sort of show who they are in a more visual way. We have a character profile activity, a lot of different ideas that will get students talking to each other and sharing and thinking about who they are, but also who is in the room with them. And so that's kind of the point here of all of these different activities, is not to learn all the curriculum outcomes that you have to learn for the whole year. It's not going to do that, but it is going to prepare students to want to engage with the learning, because as of course we teachers know, politicians believe we can do what we do online. It's just us talking, right? No, of course it's not. It's all the things that we do to facilitate the learning. Our wonderful student council hosted a series of advisory activities where teachers hosted a different activity that was happening in their classroom, and students could choose a place or drop in or move between the spaces a little bit. We did have some limitations, of course, with COVID, but the nice thing is that they had such a variety. We had music happening on the stage in the center of our school. We had games and cookie decorating and video dance contests, all kinds of fun things happening. And students were able to go and enjoy those different activities. And we've done that over the years. And now this idea of framing that with work and play, hopefully more and more we get a little more time in that direction, because it always just turns out so beautifully. Students just love those. So year one for staff, as I just discussed, those startup week activities were huge. Once we were through that week, there was understanding. So anyone who gave it a shot, a lot of teachers were like, thank you. Oh my goodness, what a great idea. This is like amazing permission I've never had. And some of us were terrified to give that much time to something like getting to know you activities, right? It sounded like a disconnect from what we were imagining we might need to do with gap filling or academic rigor. But when we had the students in front of us, it was clear that they were not ready to jump right into that. And I think there was a lot of celebration happening that we had this plan in place for what to do with them, how to get them back into, school shape, I guess. We brought in for our August PD days as well a wonderful sports psychologist, speaker, and educator at our local GPRC, Matt Bain, and he talked about top down and bottom up. So top down cognitive behavioral therapy, using the things that we know about how our brains work to recognize behavior and change patterns, and then the bottom up polyvagal therapy. bottom-up polyvagal theory, where our bodies send our nervous systems into distress, even though there might not be a danger. That's our wonderful lizard brain at work. And of course, everything feels like an emergency in a pandemic. Alongside our CASEL framework that we've landed on and are taking up those specific outcomes, we are continuing with our advisory activity of the month. And the idea of this is that gradual release form of, we do this in a PD day as staff in departments or in small groups. And then we take that to our students as the leader for our advisory blocks at some point in the month. So if we see them 4 or 5 times, one of those times, can we bring in this kind of activity that's already ready to go? We have had some great feedback. Some people want a fully scripted dialogue and activity execution. Some people would just want to know the outcome and let me run with it. And then some people want somewhere in the middle there. So we are trying to craft our activities as such now. So for those people who are interested in having a very scripted form, we have a very scripted, specific version. And then here's the outcome for those of us that want to just run with it. And then sort of the general idea and process for those people who are sort of in that middle range. So the idea is not that we all have to do the exact same thing, but the idea is that we're all focusing on the same skill. As we've started to do that, we've realized that there is some overwhelm with that enormous, beautiful list of outcomes from CASEL. And so with that in mind, we're starting to level for grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, thinking about a student going through those 4 years with us and what they would take away by the end. But because we're all working through this process for the first time, we're doing every year the same at this time. So eventually we'll get to grade 9s have their own thing, and 10s and 11s and 12s. Our next steps, we are continuing with our startup intervention. So we're about to go into semester 2 and go through that same process, possibly online. So if that's the case, we'll have to rethink some of our startup activities. And yet there's still a lot of gold there that can be transferred over, maybe in different forms, but definitely some great things there. We're looking to continue bringing in experts, and yet we're trying to avoid overwhelm with resources. So there's quite a variety of people on staff who would like to have just the activities we're doing and no more. And some people are looking for more language and literature as well. So we're looking at continuing to bring in different resources and texts into our social emotional library and our school library, and thinking about the different experts that we can utilize in our community and beyond to help us in this journey. Leveling. So what will we focus on at which grade? That's coming. What will this 4-year progression look like? But like I said, we're going to kind of go through the process and then start to level. So we're all looking at, where do we start, right? What are the starting points here? And then building a common language and common practice surrounding social emotional languages, building a common language and having access to a common pool of terms and language, and having a common understanding of what these mean, how we might model them, where they show up, why they're important. All of that is sort of setting the standard for our professional development in this area. And we're continuing to look at bringing in experts and growing and thinking about how do we prioritize for what is the most important thing right now, and yet creating that consistency that can happen over years. So some measures of success that we've found. It's nice to have things to look for and celebrate with when you identify them. I love this proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we want to go far. We want this to go the distance for years and years. If I'm only looking for things to show up in ways that I'm expecting, I'm going to miss a lot of great stuff that's happening. So here's what I look for in ways that just don't have anything to do with me. I look for staff cracking open. Can people have an emotional reaction? Can they share? Are they safe? Do they feel comfortable to let that out? It doesn't happen all the time, and it shouldn't. We don't want to be, crying at school all the time. That happens. What can you do? But, when we're meeting as staff, when we're doing these different PD activities, are people able to connect and be real with each other, be authentic and transparent? Is there a sense of danger when people, share like that? Do they feel safe? Do they have behaviors that make them look like they feel safe? What kinds of gains have we made as a staff, even just with those communication areas, or with people, hearing the language in the hallway? So things like that they're hard to measure. In fact, a lot of this is going to be really invisible for a long time, but not all of it. And so, some of this work I can see for myself and for others is to equip ourselves with the tools to perceive what's out there and what's happening. I'm great at this with students, but I don't spend as much time with my fellow staff members as I do with my kids in my classroom. So I might have a really great barometer for what's too soon or too fast or too heavy for my class. But what's happening in the school in so many different classrooms, that can be really hard to gauge. And so having a variety of staff members and people who are willing to say, hey, I don't want to do that. That sounds terrible. That's too fast. Or even so, if you're thinking about your own social emotional journey at your school, and I hope you are, what does it mean for you in this local place? Forget the global, forget the the things that are happening in other places. What does this mean for you and your school and your staff and your students to be socially and emotionally healthy? If we look at that place of proficiency and not deficiency, we can plan for what it is to be healthy and successful and functional in a way that's not just targeting here are the problems. So it does help you kind of shape the goal that you're working towards. We're continuing to do that. We're still sort of qualifying what does that look like for us in 4 years, but we're on the way. What are individual values? So this is a step that I would recommend invest in that Dare to Lead book by Brene Brown. She's awesome. But if you take a look at one of the activities she has in there about values identification, we did this as an English department a few years ago, and people still remember and utilize and display those values that they identified and shared. And so using this in this kind of committee is really a helpful first step because everybody's got a different reason that they're there. And so what's important to one person might not be valuable to another until you know it's valuable to that person. So the last questions I would suggest that you think about with your committee or whatever the planning group looks like is what is our common purpose? So there are things that are not for us to do. We cannot change anything in central office, but we can argue about all those things that we would like to change for a really long time and get absolutely nothing done. So it's not helpful at really any level because we don't have solutions, and that's not for us to sort of tackle. But we do have a lot of things to tackle with, okay, how can we help teachers who host clubs connect and get those clubs out there to students? Well, we can set up the tables for that kind of a lunch event. We can make the advertising and we can give them a sign up sheet. And then all they have to do is show up and bring a couple students who are in that club to talk about it. So that was one of the things that one of our amazing members did. We helped out with that, but oh my gosh, she spearheaded that and that was fantastic. And just making it accessible and easier for people to do the things they're already doing is really one of the big pushes of our committee, alongside some of these social emotional curriculum outcomes and delivery. Well, thank you so much for joining me. What a joy to present all of this hard work that we've completed over the past year and a half. And I'm so excited to see what comes next. So my hope is that this will be an ongoing ethnography. And of course, if you have questions, if you have thoughts to share or ideas to share, or you'd like to pick my brain a little bit more, I would welcome any communication for sure. You can see my 2 email addresses are here. Please feel free to connect with me if you'd like. And thank you again for joining me this morning or this afternoon or whenever it is that you're tuning in. Hope you have a wonderful convention 2022 and a wonderful year ahead. Thanks, everyone.